People who like history have been asking a question for a long time. They wonder if there was a huge flood that covered the whole world in the past. This idea is not only found in the Bible, but also in the stories of many different groups of people. This makes some people think that maybe all these stories are about the same big event. In these stories, they talk about water covering everything, even the highest mountains. Some experts who study these things say that for this kind of flood to happen, the Earth would need to be flooded by at least 2 more entire oceans. That's a lot of water. But does this mean the people from the past exaggerated how big the flood was? Maybe not. There's a person named Chan Thomas who used to work for a group called the CIA. He's really sure that not only could a huge flood happen again, but he thinks it will happen soon. So when and why would the Earth be covered by water like that? And why do some people believe this flood really happened? Well, one reason is that many different groups of people who never talk to each other have stories about this flood. This makes some people think there might be some truth to it, and it's not just a coincidence. But how else can we find out if this flood really happened? Nowadays, most of what we know about ancient times comes from old maps made by sailors. These sailors had to make the maps very accurate because their lives depended on knowing where they were going. However, some of these drawings only pose new questions. For instance, a map by Puri Reis, an Ottoman navigator created in 1513, shows Antarctica, which Europe would only learn about 300 years later. More so, I'm the old document. A part of land connects it to South America. And where's the giant Drake Passage which separates the continents today? It's present on a later map created in 1685, but it's really tiny. So the locations of the other parts of the land are pretty relative too. In this case, the cartographers put more emphasis on ocean currents, and the comments on the map state that some of them had changed their direction by that time, which is why voyagers were acquired in updated version. A large-scale water cataclysm could have actually changed the current's course. Besides, scientists have some other, more convincing evidence that the greater part of the land on our planet was submerged. This is American geologist J. Harlan Bredz, labeled mad by the academic community for over half a century. The reason behind that is that starting from 1923, he published a series of sensational articles on the origin of the Columbia Plateau relief. The researcher drew attention to the many wide, flat areas in the region. Bredz was convinced that regular, slow erosion couldn't be the cause behind such abnormal terrain. He tried various theories and concluded that only a global flood could have led to it. Nonetheless, the Geological Society hurried to reject Bredd's theory, calling it ugly. It's quite an emotional statement for people who usually use as neutral expressions as possible, isn't it? While his colleagues were making fun of Bredz, claiming the researcher had simply read too many myths, Christians started real persecution. They said the researcher was blasphemous, trying to combine the biblical Great Flood and science. For decades, Bredz was an outcast, and it could have all gone on that way, except that technological advances enabled the creation of the first satellite maps. On them, the abnormally broad areas of the Columbia Plateau became obvious to absolutely everybody. In the marginal Great Flooding theory suddenly went mainstream. In 1979, when Harlan Bredz was 97 years old, the Geological Society of America officially recognized the scholar's theory and, as an excuse, even awarded him the top prize, the Penrose Medal. Did scientists refuse to even listen to anything about this interesting suggestion without even attempting to debunk it? Had they been trying to conceal this information until the last moment? And if, in this case, justice was eventually served, what about the other flood hypotheses deemed pseudoscientific even today? In 1966, a retired CIA agent, Chan Thomas, published a book titled The Adam and Eve Story. It was a significant breakthrough for the author because previously, for some reason, no publisher had been willing to print his work. However, right after publication, Thomas's ex-colleagues from the CIA classified the Adam and Eve story. They disliked its content so much that the American government tried to erase any reference to his work. What if those were the CIA agents who had prohibited publishers from publishing the book? But the strangest thing is that we still don't know what exactly Chan Thomas wrote about. In 2013, American activists demanded the book be declassified, invoking the U.S. Freedom of Information Act. The CIA accepted their quest, and said they tried to solve the problem, but they kept it on hold for another 6 years, and only in 2019, many activists requested access again. A file titled The Adam and Eve Story appeared on the CIA website, but it only contained 57 pages instead of the original 284, and even they had undergone editing. But what could Chan Thomas have written about in his work that even 70 years later, the CIA still views as dangerous? The 57 declassified and edited pages from Chan Thomas's book led to one main conclusion. The author was convinced a true apocalypse awaits us. Moreover, it's bound to happen within the upcoming 100 years. Thomas states it'll all start with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, which will be happening simultaneously all over the planet. But the most terrible thing will come next. Due to a shift in the Earth's crust, waves as high as 2 or 3 kilometers will rise in the ocean. They'll be able to annihilate not only coastal cities and towns, but entire countries. And if such an apocalyptic scenario is really possible, could the recent earthquakes in Turkey and Syria and the volcanic activity on Indonesian islands be precursors to the new flood? But how did Chan Thomas come up with the idea that the Earth would die soon? What exactly is supposed to launch this chain of disasters? The ex-CIA agent was sure the primary trigger would be an interchange of our planet's poles, though not magnetic, but physical. Roughly speaking, the planet's thin crust will slide on the melted mantle so that the north will become the south and vice versa. And they're not Chan Thomas tales, since scientists had developed this hypothesis long before him. In 1953, an American professor, Charles Hapgood, published an article arguing that the Earth's crust is in constant motion because our planet's magnetic field occasionally undergoes changes, and the oscillations are insignificant. Earth's physical poles only shift several kilometers. But in exceptional cases, according to Hapgood, a complete inversion may occur, and the north becomes the south and vice versa. The scientists thought these inversions were responsible for most unexplainable geographic anomalies and even in global cataclysms. Hapgood was certain that we're not the first civilization on Earth at all. It's just that all the previous civilizations fell during global disasters, while those that survived had to rebuild society from scratch several times. Notably, Albert Einstein supported this incredible theory. Hapgood's book on the spontaneous pole shifts became the first work to which the renowned physicist agreed to write a foreword. But even despite such support, the ideas of the drifting poles never spread widely. Just like with breaths, Charles Hapgood and his hypotheses were mocked by the academic community. However, over the years, the reasons to laugh are becoming fewer and fewer, since indirect evidence for this seemingly fantastic theory is only accumulating. In 2007, on the Russian Yamal Peninsula, a forest ranger found a fossil mammoth calf. He later named the fine Yuba after his wife. The baby mammoth differed greatly from her cousins previously found by archaeologists, as she was perfectly preserved. But the most exciting thing was waiting for scientists during the dissection. They found undigested plant remains, including some tropical flowers in Lioba's stomach. But how did these exotic plants end up in cold Siberia? Does this mean that it used to be a paradise? Some scientists assume that mammoths remain in Russia are so well preserved going to a sudden shocking temperature shift. Roughly speaking, it grew cold so swiftly that the dead animals' bodies just didn't have time to decompose. So, did mammoths initially live in jungles and eat tropical fruits before they died suddenly of hypothermia? This is how it would be if Earth's poles inverted their position. Besides, back in 1899, a Russian scholar, Vasily Dokuchayev, astonished the academic community with his study of the northern hemisphere soiled. His analysis indicated that the lower layers in Greenland received even less sunlight millennia ago than they do today. In other words, back in the day, Greenland could have been our planet's northernmost point. It might seem the difference is not that big, but if you shift the pole this way, global climate zones will move substantially, and then tropical plants could indeed have grown in Siberia. Moreover, this theory was recently backed by discoveries from an area seemingly far away from geology. Architecture. Ancient temples and places of worship were usually built considering the position of the sun on specific days, like during the spring and autumn equinoxes. It means that such monumental complexes' layouts strictly matched the position of the cardinal points, And if a pole used to be in a different place, most of the ancient structure's orientation should match it. What a coincidence, then, that the Cambodian Kokare Pyramid isn't oriented towards a point we now view as the North Pole, but Greenland. The same is true for the Teotihuacan Temple in Mexico and the Berlin Cathedral, as well as at least 40 other monumental structures worldwide. It appears that since the times when these temples were built, the pole has really changed its position slightly. But what actually underlies this planetary disaster mechanism? From a scientific perspective, how can some magnetic oscillations cause an interchange of the physical north and south? This is a tippy top, and its main feature is its displaced center of gravity. At some point after spinning, the top turns upside down but continues spinning on its stem. Basically, the north and south invert. But why? For many years, scientists thought the effect was caused by friction. However, none of them could accurately calculate the model based on this hypothesis. The correct answer was found only in 1985 by pure accident. This is it for today's video. What do you think of our video? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more future updates. Thanks for watching.